one of my favorite experiences from the holiday season as a child was the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer special. You remember that? And one of the things I really loved about that story was the island of misfit toys. And if you don't remember, it was a place that Rudolph and Yukon Cornelius and the elf who wanted to be a dentist, Herman, I think his name was, Herbie, and they came, and they were all struggling because they were all misfits. They were the hapless prospector and the red-nosed reindeer, or the elf that wanted to be a dentist, and they didn't quite fit. So here we are in the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer special, and they're going on their journey, which we all journey, and they come across the island of misfit toys. And here they find an elephant with spots and a train that had square wheels on its caboose. And there was a jack-in-the-box, Charlie, inappropriately named Charlie, and of course there was a water gun that shot jelly, which I thought was a good idea. I didn't know, but they were all on the island of misfit toys, realizing that none of them could really feel fulfilled unless they had a child who would love them. And there they were. And as the story goes, ultimately they do find a child, or the story goes, they all get taken to children. And they are loved. And it strikes me that isn't that really our Christmas story? Isn't that it? Aren't we all living on an island of misfit toys? Aren't we all broken and vulnerable and looking to be loved and to share love with one another? And it goes right back to our nativity stories in the Gospels. Right? Because everything about that story, as it has been handed down to us through the centuries, is wrong. Everything is wrong. Everything is broken. This isn't the way the Son of God, the Messiah, the Savior of the world, the heir to David's throne, this isn't the way he's supposed to come into the world. Everything is broken. His mother, an unwed peasant girl in Nazareth, of all places. His father, Joseph, no royalty, not of the priestly class. Perhaps, we're told in the genealogy from the line of David, but we're not quite sure of the child's parentage. So it's all broken. The place is broken. In the middle of the night, out in the middle of nowhere, born not in a hospital, but in a cave in all likelihood, among the animals. If we know anything about Jewish culture and history, we know that this is really an unfortunate situation. The idea that a child would be born away from home, among the filth of animals. We set up these nice, cute little mangers underneath our Christmas trees, and we make them all look cozy. It wasn't like that, It wasn't like that at all. There's nothing cozy or tidy about it. It would have been a mess. Everything about it was broken. And that's who we are. And that's how God decides to enter our world and enter our lives and enter our hearts. Not in the miraculous beauty of the temple or among the priestly class or anyone else that had status and high standing in the culture. Not in a clean, tidy way, but in the most broken, vulnerable way you can possibly imagine. This is how This is how God enters our world and enters our lives. And we have to stop and think about that. Everyone is a misfit. Jesus himself became a misfit. He would have been relegated to something that the Hebrews called the mamzer state, someone of somewhat questionable. Please, come on in. No, that's quite all right. We were waiting for you. Sorry. So here we are, We end up with this Christmas story in which everything is broken and wrong and vulnerable and imperfect. So, how do we respond? We respond by trying to create a Christmas experience for ourselves in which everything is perfect. The worst thing that ever happened to Christmas is Currier and Ives. We try to create this image, this experience in which everything is wonderful and warm and cozy and tidy, and it's all wrong. That's not the way it's supposed to be at all. Everything about Christmas, in its origins and in the stories that have been handed down to us, is about the unconditional love of Christ in an imperfect world among imperfect people. And so what do? We try to tidy it up and make it all perfect. We keep trying to replicate this romanticized image that has been handed down in our culture. And the result is we all end up being completely stressed out. Everyone is tired and exhausted and stressed by the time Christmas comes because we keep trying to make everything so wonderful. But we're preparing the wrong thing. We're trying to make the world perfect instead of celebrating the wonder of unconditional love, the wonder of a God who would come to the island of misfit toys, to us. Our attempts at creating the perfect Christmas for ourselves and our family end up undermining what Christmas really ought to be all about. And here's what I think Christmas is. This is what I think we are called to simply do two things. To see Christ in one another and to be Christ to one another. That's it. To allow our own hearts to be mangers for the birth of Christ in our world, to give God life in our world, in our own hearts. Christmas is not something we commemorate or remember. It's something we celebrate. It's something we experience. And we do that by preparing our own hearts like simple mangers to give, in all of their brokenness, to give God a place to come to life so that we might be Christ to one another and see Christ in each other. We're challenged to see Christ in the vulnerability and in the brokenness and in the misfittedness that lives among us and around us and within each other all the time. So there are two questions that I invite us to ponder a little bit this evening. First, how does the hurt, the pain, and the vulnerability in our world reveal the real love of Christ to us? How does the brokenness and the hurt and the pain and the vulnerability that we see all around us in our world reveal the unconditional love of Christ to each of us? And secondly, how do others see and experience Christ through our own imperfections, and vulnerability? Do we let people see and experience the very real presence of Christ through our own imperfections and vulnerabilities? Or do we deny them or try to hide them?